This training video will introduce students to how we prepare fruit for the McKernan Center fruit platters. There are two different types of platters that we do. We do platters with the fruit, the rind on, and we do platters where the rind has been removed. One thing to know is that our basic fruit that we use for our fruit platters are honeydew, pineapple, cantaloupe. Berries, kiwi, oranges are treated as accent garnish fruit. So the first thing to do is make sure that your workstation is set up. You have a cutting board that has a damp cloth underneath to prevent any sliding and prevent any injuries, a damp cloth for cleaning, a sharp chef knife, paring knife, a soup spoon, your fruit, a baking sheet that has been lined with a piece of saran wrap, and a garbage bucket. The first fruit that I will work with is the honeydew. Now there's a non-culinary term that I use called the pole ends, North Pole, South Pole. So what you do with your melon on your cutting board, you are going to cut off the two pole ends, trying to cut as parallel as possible to minimize waste later on when you go to slice. Then what I do is I take the knife and I make a first cut down the middle and then back down the other side toward the middle. So when you've cut that in half, the reason why you do one side and then back down to the middle is to minimize the seeds being dragged through the flesh and scarring it. Then what you do, taking the soup spoon, gently scrape the fibers and the seeds out of the melon. And I like to have the seed pods still showing. I believe that food should be as natural as possible. And so, but you do want to make sure that all the seeds are removed like that. Now that all the seeds have been removed, you're going to flip this over, and using your index finger as a guide, you're going to make what I call fat quarter slices. And you want to be as consistent as possible, cutting all the way down the length of the melon. Now that all the slices have been done, you're going to reshape it back into its original shape and then make a cut down the middle. Using your knife, you're going to put it underneath the slices and transport it over to your waiting baking sheet. Now we're going to work on the cantaloupe in the exact same manner as we did with the honeydew by cutting off the pole ends. Again, remembering to try and keep your cut as parallel as possible, and then the cuts down the center like that. With your soup spoon, you again will very gently scrape out all the seeds, and then the cantaloupe will be ready to slice in the exact same manner as you did for the honeydew. Similar treatment for the pineapple. You have your pole ends, which need to be cut off. Now, pineapples are a little more pesky to work with because they leave a lot of residue on your cutting board. So you do need to keep your cutting board and your knife clean. After having removed the top and the bottom, you're going to make a cut down through the middle, through the core, and then again down through the core. Then what you do, you want to remove the woody core just by a simple slice on the outside of the core, like that. We're going to be cutting these using that index finger to mark your fat quarters. But if I were, this right now is a wobbly piece of fruit. If I were to cut with the open face away from the knife, I could risk going over and potentially getting a finger caught underneath the knife. By having the open side face me where I'm cutting into the edge of the skin, not only is it easier for the blade to cut into that tougher skin, but it means that I'm rocking into the cutting board, making it a much more stable, therefore safe object. Now with the garnish fruit, oranges, again you will cut off the pole ends. You will cut it in half and then into thinner slices, and using your index finger to cross over the knife to keep these slices in sequence as they are cut, which will be helpful when it comes time to plating. For this, I recommend using a paring knife, and you cut off your pole ends, and then very carefully, so as to minimize the amount of flesh taken off, you just slice down outside of the fruit, making small little turns and just kind of sliding and guiding the knife down the outside. What you're trying to do is minimize the amount of flesh taken off, and don't worry about the underside of the curve. You're working blind, you can't see that, so you will actually go back and cut that off after you've gone around. Now I'm going to go back and just remove what I missed in the first go around, and then you will cut thin slices. Strawberries are very simple. I like to keep the leaves on and simply just cut down through the middle, which exposes a lovely pattern and color. But until you actually plate them, keep them together, and you just go through and you cut however many you like. Often it is recommended to use an asymmetrical or an uneven amount. The other type of fruit platter that we do is using fruit where the rind has been removed. Starting with the pineapple, what you're going to do is, holding it securely on your cutting board, is make cuts along the inside of the rind. And notice that as I turn it, I'm holding it like this again for safety. I'm going to go back and just remove the biggest of the eyes of the pineapple. And again, remember with pineapple, you need to work keeping your board free of the cutoffs from the pineapple. Cut it in half, remove that core, and then proceed with the 1/4 inch slices as we have done before. The cantaloupe is easy to work with because you have a well-defined line of what needs to come off. As I say in this kitchen, you don't want to have any green showing on your cut fruit. So again, I'm going to follow that line around the curve, and I'm going to make small turns. Now this is a fairly firm cantaloupe, so it's harder to have the knife glide cut smoothly through, but I'm trying to make cuts that are fairly smooth to avoid sort of choppy planes. I will go back afterwards and tidy this up. And again, working on the underside, I'm working blind, I will go back in and catch that. So now I have finished, and there you can see it retains a fairly uniform round shape, and there is no green showing. And this is ready to carry on slicing in your thick 1/4 slices. That would then be cut in half and transferred to the board. The honeydew is a little bit trickier because the line of demarcation between where it is firm and crunchy, the outer layer, and the sweeter, softer inner layer is much harder to determine. Here you can see a line. You want to go inside that line to make sure that there is none of the sort of crunchy outer layer left on the fruit. And there you have the finished half of honeydew, at which point again, fat 1/4 slices, cut in half, and transferred to the tray. All right, now we're going to begin plating the platter that has the fruit with the rinds cut off. So for this, what I like to do is I like to start with 3 or 4 slices, and I tend to work, just out of habit, with the honeydew first. And you want to create a band of fruit, having it go in a general loose line. You want to avoid having any straight lines. Then I will fill in with cantaloupe. And again, notice I'm beginning to build up height. I'm beginning to create a bit of pattern and rhythm. And I'm fanning out these slices. Then I will begin to come back in with pineapple. And this is why it's important, or it's helpful, to keep all of the pieces in the order that you cut so that they form a sequence from smaller to large or large to small. Doing fruit platters is something where you don't really want to overthink it. You want to just kind of take the fruit and just begin to plate it. What will happen is this foundation of fruit will change once you begin to get your accent garnish fruit on there and begin to fill in the spaces and build up your height. And I'm going to fill in with a bit of cantaloupe over at this end. Make sure to look out for in case there are any seeds that have been left. Now I'm going to take orange slices and begin to build up height in these open spaces. Now it's important to note that every platter has a 6 o'clock position. That is the position that will be facing the guest or how it will be put on the buffet table. And so with these orange slices, I am using them to fill the space, create height. And what will begin to happen is right now the colors, it's a very almost monochromatic, even value. Nothing really stands out. It's all, if you squint, they all look at about the same shade of color from light to dark. What begins to happen though is that when I add the strawberries in, all of a sudden colors begin to pop and there become different areas of the plate that you begin to notice as the eye moves around. And what you're achieving is pattern, flow, motion, height, and a non-static presentation. So right now, I've got the strawberries, and I'm going to go back and add in blueberries. And we don't always put blueberries on, but blueberries dramatically change the effect of the platter. And I just very informally scatter them on in certain spots. And all of a sudden now, the colors begin to pop. The blue contrasts with warmer reds and oranges and yellows. And there you go. In a matter of minutes, you have your fruit platter. Now I'm going to give you a different perspective on putting together the fruit platters. I'm going to refer to this one and I'm going to try to replicate it, but using fruit that has the rind on. And remember, at this point, you were seeing it from being in the 6 o'clock position. So again, I start with my honeydew. And one thing you will find is that working with the rind on, it is a lot easier. The slices tend to, now there I have a seed. I'm just going to remove that. Always keep an eye out for anything like that. There we go. And then I am going to come in with the cantaloupe to fan that out. Now these slices are that much larger because we have a good extra 1/4 of an inch in because of the rind. One thing that's also important is keeping in mind that you want every type of fruit to be accessible by guests reaching it. So this way you can see that they could take any of the fruit that is on the platter without having to dig for it. Now I'm going to start filling in with the oranges. And again, the oranges help get that height, develop a different pattern, and fill in these holes, which are often harder to fill with melon and pineapple. And again, you will note that I am just sort of working quickly. I'm not overthinking it, and know that when I add those garnished fruit in at the end, it will change the overall appearance. And now the strawberries I like to present in pairs. Often it is recommended to have an uneven number of strawberries or any other fruit. And now this is not identical to that platter, but the overall effect is very similar. And in this case, I'm adding about an equal number of strawberries. I did not add the kiwi on to the first platter. I'm going to tuck it in here, and I'm just going to minimally working it, just sort of tuck it in to various places. It's an unusual looking kiwi in that it is not green. And then I am going to go back in and now fill in with the blueberries. And again, just a very rustic, informal sprinkling. Notice that I'm not throwing it on there, scattering it across the entire surface. It is in a somewhat controlled method. And there you go. So here you have the 2 finished platters, one without the rind, one with. My preference is for this one with the rind because you have the extra effect of the banding, color, and texture created by the rinds of the different fruits. But looking at the 2 of them, except for that difference, they look fairly similar. There's pattern, there's flow, but it's not in defined geometric bands. There's height, there's rhythm, and there's contrast of color. This makes for a pleasing appetizer platter for our guests at the